Today I'll be running through 10 tips I wish I knew from the get-go when starting to play Ravenswatch. These should give the newer players a few key insights, and the more experienced people might learn something new. Ravenswatch has some interesting systems, and there are more than a few strategies to help maximize your chances of a great run. Before I get into the tips, I just want to say this video has an expectation that you know a little bit about Ravenswatch. Maybe you've done 1 or 2 runs. It's worth understanding that, and if you have never played Ravenswatch, please check out this Ravenswatch review that I've done as well, which goes into it in way more detail and gives you the nuts and bolts of what the game is made of first. Then come back for the 10 tips. Right, so without further ado, let's get into number 1. Point number 1. You only have a limited amount of time per chapter, so saving time is key. Your time doesn't start until you actually leave the spawn area itself. There's like a sand wall around the shop, if you like, but when you pass that wall, that's when the time starts. So you can spend time before the time start to look at what the potential purchases are in the shop, but also look at the map and understand what points of interest are currently revealed and where you should go first, but also you can kind of plan your route. When you look at the map, there are large areas which is where the points of interest will be. So you can kind of focus on maybe going through less of the smaller paths that take you from one to another, and also capitalize on the points of interest that are already revealed so that you're capitalizing on how much time you have. You know, try and aim for those larger areas, but also you need to level up before you go to some of the further away regions. Point number 2. You want to make sure that any of these points of interest that you do intend to go to, or you come across, that you find that early on in the game you may come across the mini boss as an example, which is a much harder point of interest to do. You might not have found the key, so make sure that you get the teleporter. This will speed up your end game within that chapter dramatically. So make the most of your time by finding those teleporters early. There's even benefit to scouting vast areas of the map right at the start just to grab the teleporters so that you can move around faster by going from point of interest to point of interest using the teleporters. So don't forget to use the TPs. Point number 3. The difficulty of a point of interest is determined by the color. It's pretty much a traffic light system. Green is easy, amber or orange is medium, and red is hard. Work on what you want to prioritize based on your level. Going after the red mini boss to start isn't wise. Even if you do survive the combat and you kill the mini boss and get the reward, you've most likely used more of the time than you wanted because it's taken you longer to kill them. Whereas if you save this fight for the last fight, let's say, you'll be a much higher level and more likely to be able to kill the boss in as little time as possible because you've got more upgrades and you've leveled up more. So there's a definite kind of curve to the amount of time it takes to kill things, which makes sense, right? So spend the time in the early game going after the easier points of interest. Point 4. Aim for the watchtowers and chests early. In the early game, the watchtowers are a great place to start. Obviously, they reveal points of interest so you can prioritize further paths, but also they give a decent XP boost early. I think it's around 225, 250 XP, which will help you level as well as get the visibility benefit. And with regards to the chests, being able to get a straight stat boost to one of your abilities, you know, the 20% power, 20% to the special, is a bigger benefit over leveling early, as it gives you a damage spike much quicker. Plus, it gives you an idea of how you'll be able to make your build. And what I mean by that is, let's say you go to the first couple of chests and both of the benefits that you get, or talents I should say, are centered around your power rather than your special. Well, now you've got an idea of where you want to build. You should always try and focus on building around the items that you get early, rather than going and seeking out particular ones. There are many builds that work, so going after the chests early can really set you up for a much better run in the future. Number 5, and this one is damn important. Do not waste time on enemies between points of interest. Particularly in the early game, these will waste your time for very little benefit. While running directly past them so that you can gain an item from a chest is a much better option, while also getting the enemy XP while doing that POI. Don't get me wrong, toward the end of the time in that chapter, when you're stronger, you can kill enemies in a single ability nice and fast. At that point, by all means, kill things on the way to different POIs, but there's no point wasting your time early going after a fight that inevitably you're not going to get much XP from, and you may die anyway. Which kind of leads on to point 6, which is save those POIs that do take more time, such as side quests, mini bosses, and grimoires, for later in the chapter. This might seem counterproductive because they take more time, so surely you want more time available. But once you're more leveled, you'll be able to find these far quicker and easier, meaning less time wasted, rather than assuming that because they take longer, you need to give it more time. Now, the thing that I really want to focus on in this point 6 is the grimoires. Grimoires give you 1 of 3 rewards from a pool of a potential 7. You get vitality, damage, armor, critical chance, critical damage, rerolls, or dream shards, and you get a certain amount bonus of that stat dependent on whether it's green, orange, or red, scaling as it becomes more difficult. These should not be overlooked because they are flat stat increases that stack to any of your talents. They're a huge benefit, but when attacking one of these, you're given 1 minute to do it. If you fail to kill the enemies within 1 minute, you don't get the reward. So you really need to pick your battles with these, but do not miss them out. Leave them towards the end when you're far stronger so that you can always defeat them. There is nothing worse than going after a grimoire to get that reward and failing and wasting more than a minute of your time. Point 7. Always plan to go to the shop before the boss. In the last 30 seconds, look at your shards and consider teleporting to the shop for a final upgrade or even a consumable like a shield boost that gives you a better chance of getting to that next chapter. In the shop, when you've been saving up your shards during the chapter, there are a couple of upgrades where you can really save some money and gain some real benefit. One of which is the one that upgrades your lowest level talent to a legendary. Well, you can determine which one is going to upgrade by making sure that there's only 1 talent at the lowest level. Therefore, that one will become legendary. And if you play your cards right, that can be a real big boost. Similarly, there's another one that upgrades 2 random skills for 200 shards. It'll take 2 random skills, 1 level above 200. If you've already got 2 skills at epic, they cost 120 to get up to legendary. So if you've got 2 of them and it's going to cost you 200, you're saving 40 shards. Now, that might be a small benefit, but this game is hugely about min-maxing. So consider how you're spending in the shop. Don't blindly purchase. Focus on the ones that are for your build and focus on using your shards to their advantage and saving in the right way. 8. Do not risk a fight for the sake of losing a feather. The feathers are far too precious when you can simply run away from some fights and come back when you're stronger, particularly in the higher difficulties where you have less feathers, but also you get less of an XP benefit. So in the harder difficulties, you receive a debuff, which is up to a decrease of 40% in XP from enemies, meaning the points of interest still give you high XP, but the enemies don't. So there's no point going into a fight with a few extra enemies when you're not going to get as much XP out of them, and you could lose a feather. You could fall into a trap and end up losing a life. It's not worth it. A point of interest will always trump enemies. Bonus tip is always try and get the feather from the hero's altar. This should be a high priority in each area. It is a life for 100 shards. This is always worth doing and looking for. Granted, you can't always find it. That can happen. You run out of time. But if you happen to find that feather, buy it. That should be your #1 priority because you're gaining a life for 100 shards. That is cheap. make sure you don't waste your feathers. Number 9, do not underestimate healing fountains. They act both as increased vitality, but also a full heal. Getting an understanding of where those healing fountains are, and not necessarily using them unless you need to. If suddenly you're on half health or, quarter health, and you're going into fight, teleport to a healing fountain. Take that fight on instead. Normally they're not very heavily guarded, and they'll give you a full heal at the end of it. And similarly, any healing fountains you see, make sure you get them. They're easy little upgrades, particularly when there are so many skills in this game that feed off what your vitality is. I'm sure we've all used the one that gives you increased damage based off your vitality. And that one stacks. So if you stack up on your vitality from the healing fountains, you get a huge boon. Number 10, talent hidden bonuses. You may have seen on certain talents the ×3, ×4, or ×5 below them. This means if you manage to get that same talent 3, 4, or 5 times respectively, you'll gain an additional bonus. This is not a game-changing bonus. However, if you're building around a particular talent, let's say you're going for your power, and you manage to get 3 power charges with the same talent, and you gain that benefit, let's face it, you're going to be using that power way more often because you've got 3 additional power charges. You may have additional bonus on it, right? And not to mention, the benefits that you get, those hidden bonuses, are permanent. When you unlock it, that very next run, that bonus will show against the talent. So it's always going to be there. Through these and figuring out which talents you like the most, and almost doing a run where your sole purpose is trying to get that same talent 3, 4, or 5 times, is going to set you up for the later difficulties in the game. Make sure you focus on this. I think this is a highly misunderstood hidden bonus in the game. So get a handle for it, go and look for them, try and find the talents you like, and get the bonuses set up. So they were 10 tips that I recommend and consider for anyone playing Ravenswatch. Hopefully you've learned something here. Please like, subscribe, turn on those notification bells, and please drop a comment on any other useful tips for the community that you know of that maybe I haven't mentioned here. This game has lots of nooks and crannies, and there's a lot to learn. I'm JammyGiraffe, sending positivity as always. Jammy out.